So, hey everyone, welcome to another Celo governance call. This is Celo governance call number 8. We have a few proposals that we're going to go over together, starting with CVP 30. CVP 30 is adding voluntary carbon credits to the reserve. Marcus, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, happy to talk a bit about that. So basically we added CGP 30 and also opened up in the forum a discussion on this proposal. The proposal in the end is to add voluntary carbon credits to the reserve. And actually, ASA was the first one to reply on the forum discussion. I actually liked a lot what he wrote. Is basically when creating a more inclusive monetary system that creates foundations of prosperity for everyone, we also need to preserve Earth's natural resources. And Celo as a protocol does this on different levels. Of course, proof of stake is much less carbon intense than proof of work consensus mechanisms. Second part is that on the protocol level, via block rewards, carbon emissions are offset, for example, currently via Project REN. But the third part is actually this year. From the start of Celo, there was this idea that it would be great if we could add nature-backed assets to the reserve. And in the end, the idea for this comes from this idea of Charles Eisenstein in his book Sacred Economics, that basically everything that backs money, people tend to make more of. So when gold backed money, people minted more gold because it's like printing money. And therefore, the nice idea would be to have a very preserving Earth's natural resources with a monetary system could work in that sense that we add nature-backed assets to the reserve. For this, to find potential nature-backed assets for the reserve actually issued a request for proposals on its webpage, basically saying, hey, if you have nature-backed assets or carbon credit tokenized, ideally on Celo, then this would be an asset we could propose to the community to add to the reserve, because it basically supports the mission, and it also basically diversifies the reserve. It also maybe diversifies into a different asset class, but also does something good for the environment, for our planet. And we basically, for this request for proposal, currently have one submission, the only one, and this is actually Project Moss. When the C-Labs team looked at Project Moss in detail, we also engaged an outside consultant to actually look at the projects in detail that are behind this token we are proposing in this governance proposal. So again, the proposal is about adding an additional asset to the reserve, and this asset basically is carbon credit. To try out basically carbon credit in the reserve, we only propose a very small percentage of the reserve to be basically put into nature-backed assets for the start. Currently, the proposal is only 0.5% of the reserve should go into these types of assets. And basically, the first token we propose here with this governance proposal would be the CMCO2 token. It is a token that tokenizes carbon credit. You can find the projects that are tokenized in the GitHub proposal. Basically, these projects have names based on their location: Madrid, Dios, Amazon, Rio, and others. And basically, these carbon credits from these projects are added to a pool, and a token is issued against this pool that represents ownership of a part of this pool, and basically therefore represents voluntary carbon credit. Basically the reserve could purchase these tokens in an over-the-counter transaction. However, these tokens are also traded. They live on the Celo blockchain, and therefore currently they are, for example, traded on the DEX on Celo, on Uniswap, where you can basically see a market price for these token, and yeah, as soon as more dexes and other places basically list Celo assets, we hopefully also see this token being listed on other marketplaces. Yeah, always happy to answer any questions. If I don't know them, at least I can find out also with Project Moss about the token itself. You can ask me here, also let us know your thoughts about it here, but you can also engage in the forum what you think about this proposal. I think it's a great step in towards basically a nature-backed reserve. Yeah, feel free to let us know what you think.
Any questions about the proposal? Nothing, no questions about the proposal. So, all right, I'll give people another chance to ask. But yeah, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. You're just adding the MCO2 token as part of the reserve, and it falls within the mission and stuff of Celo for carbon credits. A lot of interesting audits are here in the white papers that people can review after. Is there one final transfer question before we move on to the next topic?
Like one question for me, for Marcus, would be if we have like a target allocation for natural gas buckets, like in the midterm, like if it's going to be 5%, 10%, or more?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and there's probably currently not at least a scientific answer to it, since basically currently at least the allocation is restricted by the supply of these types of assets. As I said, Project Moss was currently the only one that answered this request for proposal. We will now also issue a second request, which is basically specifically for nature-backed assets, not for carbon credit, but nature-backed assets. Because you could think about, I don't know, tokenized forest in a sense. There are a lot of questions about these assets. It is easier to create an asset like this with carbon credit because carbon credit is already traded in some form. There are a lot of registries out there already. The carbon credit that is tokenized here also lives on the Vera registry, and for carbon credit experts, they basically also certify the quality of these tokens. It is just easier to tokenize carbon credit than to tokenize forest, because when tokenizing forest, yeah, you also have to think about what happens if the forest burns down, or who basically takes care of the forest, all these questions. We really hope that this changes soon. So I like, especially in the last 3-4 weeks, I had a lot of calls with projects that plan to do it. And as soon as we see more projects that actually doing it, they're doing it in a way that is verifiable, auditable, that is basically that the Celo community can actually really verify that these assets are in place, then we can increase the percentage of the reserve. And I would guess, I mean, it always depends a bit on the other assets in the reserve. But yeah, I mean, from 0.5%, we certainly can go to 5 or 10%. Because yeah, it's an important asset class. It's also an asset class that is super interesting from a risk perspective, since it's basically not as highly correlated with Bitcoin than all the other assets in the reserve, and therefore offers diversification benefit. And therefore, yeah, I can actually see that we propose increasing the asset, and in the end, it would be probably, again, via a discussion with our community, what do you think about these assets? What do you think about 5%, for example? For now, unfortunately, we have to start with 0.5% to just like have the first asset in there, since there's not many projects out there. I hope that helped a bit.
Amazing. Thanks, Marcus.
Sure.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice, nada. All right. Core contracts release 4. Unfortunately, I don't have a link to any material on core contract. I did request it yesterday. Is York here? York is not here. If we don't have a champion for core contract release 4, unfortunately, I have to move on to the next topic. All right, let me go to the other topic then. Grandamento activation is still in pull request, but it should be like a rough early version. Let me see, view file. Okay. Albert, Trevor, do you guys want to kick it off?
Yeah. So I can talk a little bit about like the technical aspect, and then I think Albert can help with like any kind of rationale for these changes. But for some context, a few weeks ago, a CIP called CIP 38 was created, and it was outlining Grandamento. And to take a step back, Mento is the name of the on-chain exchange that kind of powers the stable token platform on Celo. And it's done a good job of keeping stability. And it does so by like allowing somebody to trade Celo for CUSD, for example, or vice versa, according to an Oracle rate. But when you trade a large amount in a single trade, it negatively impacts the price that you would receive. So the impact is that if I were to use Mento, I'm able to mint small amounts of CUSD, but not significant amounts of CUSD. And we're noticing a problem where if I'm an individual or an organization that wants to mint a lot of CUSD, there isn't really a good way to do that. So you could purchase the CUSD on a centralized exchange or over the counter. But at current volumes, you're still probably going to like max out around like 100,000 CUSD. So Grandamento is just a solution to facilitate really large exchanges between Celo and stable tokens on the order of millions. So if you're interested in how it works technically, there's this CIP. But what the CGP I'm proposing is initial parameters for this Grandamento contract. So the way Grandamento works is a proposer, let's say I'm trying to sell a significant amount of Celo in exchange for CUSD. I would deposit that Celo into this Grandamento contract. And then that proposal is kind of just pending. And it needs to be explicitly approved by a multisig that governance will elect. So that's one of the parameters here. So that multisig of individuals will have to be chosen by governance, which is section 1 right there. And I think that's a discussion that I'm definitely interested in hearing feedback on, just on like who should be on this multisig. But I guess I can go through all of these parameters and then we can talk about each one as people wish. So once that proposal has been approved by an approver, then this proposal kind of sits in a veto period where governance can step in and say, hey, I didn't agree with the action of this approver. Let's cancel this exchange altogether. So that's what veto period seconds is there. We're thinking it should be around 2 weeks to give ample time for governance to kind of react, to like actually vote on it on chain. And then also kind of balancing the needs of potential exchangers not wanting to sit around and like lock their funds for too long before an exchange were to execute. Number 3 is the spread. So that's just kind of a fee that's imposed upon this like exchange. The proposed spread here is actually 0. And there's some rationale here behind comparing how Grandamento would work to USDT or USDC, where they have significantly lower fees than what we were kind of initially thinking for the spread. So the spread on Mento, for example, when you trade is 0.5%. With USDT, there's only a 0.1% fee, and then they have a much lower limit than we would likely put for Grandamento on how much you can exchange at a time. And you don't have to worry about these kind of lockup periods, like there's no veto period or anything. So we're kind of thinking of the main friction and the main cost to using Grandamento is the exchanger depositing their Celo for 2 weeks and not knowing if it's going to be executed or not. So there's an opportunity cost to like locking up those funds. And if the spread is large or anything more than 0%, there might be enough friction to deter like a large organization or individual from using Grandamento. And then finally, this is kind of an implementation detail, but there's this, there are these stable token exchange limits. And this is that I couldn't, it's basically a minimum and a maximum amount of CUSD that I'm able to purchase or sell in a single transaction. And it's kind of just a safety check. The rationale behind having a minimum exchange amount is because Grandamento isn't really appropriate for people who, or organizations who want to use it for small amounts of money. Like this is intended to be kind of a frictionful, if that's a word, process. And then the maximum exchange amount is kind of just a safety check, just making sure that it can't be too large. Happy to answer any questions if people have about specific parameters or just anything about Grandamento. And then Albert, feel free to add any more context.
Any questions so far on Grandamento? I guess my question specifically is, you're defining a process for how people can submit, requests for using Grandamento, right? Is that process, is it going to be within GitHub, like if somebody submits a proposal, or is it going to be on the forum? How is that going to work?
Still very much up in the air. I'd love to hear any like feedback in general. What I've heard so far is some sort of process where the exchanger would post on the forum first and then be transparent about where they got the Celo, like what their intents for the exchange is, all of that. Anything to be kind of in the goodwill of the community. I'm not totally sure if that's appropriate for like a CIP to outline that process, given it's kind of like a human process, right?
Yeah. So you have this BIP specification. I believe when I reviewed it, there was a mention about that, like a potential process, right? I'm trying to figure out where it was.
Yeah, there was definitely a comment about it. And then I think I added like a small note about what it should look like.
It can have the following state. I think that's when you submit a proposal and stuff, right? Is that it? Or that on chain rather?
Yeah, that's on chain.
Okay.
Okay, up above it, where you just were.
Up
You
above.
scroll up a little bit more. Under number 1, under specification, it says off-chain, each proposal should be shared with the community in a forum post. For transparency, the post should share where the token being sold is coming from, when it was acquired, and at what price it was acquired.
Okay. I think like at least because I think that can be another thing you can add like another CIP, but it doesn't have to be very detailed. Like I think what you're looking for is just like a simple process. Step 1, you copy this preamble and you specify the preamble, which I believe you did here. Like this kind of preamble, and like, talk about the motivation and, submit it on the, create a forum post, etc. Just like something really simple. I don't think it should be as detailed as CIP, and it doesn't have to be like, what do you call it? A standard CIP, but more best practices. I think I'm trying to figure out what the name we created for these kind of things. Yeah, so it can be an informational CIP and just describe the process or like guideline for something. And that could be any format you want, as long as you fill out the right preamble for that CIP, you can create the process as you want. But it shouldn't take like if you already have an idea on the process, it's just like, trying to make sure that that is included as a reference point for the CIP. But that would be my feedback. Otherwise, if because here what you're describing in the original CIP is 38, right? Yeah, you're describing how Grandamento would work, like as a specification for like interaction with the core contracts, right? But it would make sense to have a process CIP just for people like who want to use Grandamento. This is what they submit and stuff like that. But that's the only feedback I have. Other than that, yeah, cool.
Cool. Yeah, I can draft up that CIP.
And like, feel free to ping me offline and stuff if you have questions and stuff. But yeah, I think it should be really easy to do and stuff. Given that, you know, the other one is really well specified and stuff.
Perfect. Yeah. So any questions or thoughts on the proposed parameters in here? I think it'll probably be maybe a couple months before this would be like proposed on chain. So there is time to kind of think about this and let it marinate. But any initial feedback?
Just to add on to Trevor's comments there about the multisig, I'm also reaching out to a few folks in the community, like a subset of the Celo Community Fund. And Ian from Ubisoft has also shown interest to be in this multisig as well. So if you're active in the community and want to be a part of this kind of gating process, reach out to me or Trevor, or do a quick PR on this proposal as well to show that you're interested.
Sounds good. Yeah, so if anyone, we can also, like, if Albert, if you have a little copy or something about like, hey, who to reach out to and stuff, I can add it to the mailing list so people can ping you after and stuff if anyone's interested. The feedback I have on the multisig is the feedback I have on any multisig that we use for the community. If there's a multisig, just, you know, put a name next to each address for the multisig, just for transparency reasons, so we know who, you know, part of the multisig and stuff. But yeah, that's cool. Anyone else has any feedback on this, on the parameters?
I was just wondering, just wondering about timing. So this is expected to land with contract release 5, Trevor?
Correct. Yeah. So I think there is an audit that C Labs has slated for mid-July that this would be included in, and then I guess timeline wise, I don't know when the actual release on chain would be following that, but I assume would probably be like within a month after that audit.
Yeah, and a second question, I guess no one really has the answer for this, but your thoughts, what will be like the behavior of the multisigs during peacetime if there is a sudden jump in Celo? My personal view should be like, at least as long as the trade is 1 in 10 year and they actually just want to meet Celo or dollar, Celo euro for the intention of protocol and not just for trading, the trade should go through no matter the price movement, because it gives you like a really bad presence, like the network always trades on their favor basically. So just wanted to wonder, what do you think, or if you have a certain threshold where the multisig should reconsider, just to set a precedent there?
Yeah, so the price at which Celo would be redeemed for CUSD is determined by the oracle price of Celo USD when the exchange proposer first submits that proposal. And I've been thinking of the multisig as like something that kind of should execute the will of the community. So I would think that like the community should give its perspective on the price that has been proposed. And then the multisig should kind of execute what the community feels. And if it doesn't, then the community has the ability to veto it. So I think it's kind of like a human process of figuring out like, is this a fair price or is it not? And I don't think that's totally black and white. But I think we can lean heavily upon like the community to kind of give their perspective. And if they feel it's not fair, then it shouldn't go through.
For context, I was specifically thinking out the case where someone submit a proposal with an oracle price, and then the price of Celo, let's say they want to exchange Celo for $, so the central price, and then the price of Celo kind of drops 10% overnight, like it could happen, or it could be even the other way around. So the multisig could pick like not to go make that trade through, but it kind of gives like a bad precedent, because the trader, the entity trying to meet that Celo would be is indeed being like 10% down, and with no $Celo in their hand if the trade gets vetoed.
Gotcha. Yeah. So before it gets approved, whoever has proposed it still has the ability to cancel their proposal. So I would think that like the entity that proposed it would be like, oh man, we're getting a bad deal. Let's cancel this maybe. But I think that is a good question just in general, like if the multisig should be more cognizant, or like if the community should be cognizant from the or of the exchanger's perspective. But I would say that like probably that can also just kind of be something that's discussed in that forum post about the proposal. So no explicit like policy, I guess.
I have a related question, related to just what you were just saying. So the proposer can cancel this, is that right?
It can cancel it prior to it being approved by the multisig. After it's been approved, then it's kind of like a free option. So cannot cancel it.
Yeah, I mean, what I was wondering, I don't know if this is a really practical concern or not, is you can make a proposal and then the price is locked in when you make the proposal. And then you have some time before that where if the price moves not in your favor, you can cancel it. So kind of, but like if the price moves in your favor, the price is kind of locked in unless it's not approved because of the price, right?
Yeah, correct. That is right.
Yeah.
One person I'd recommend if they're down for the multisig is Zviad, because they've been very, Zviad has been very vocal and stuff about, making it fair for the community. So if there's a way to nominate people and he's comfortable with that, I would love to see him as part of the multisig.
Yeah, I've definitely reached out to Zviad about the multisig as well.
Cool. All right. Is there any other questions on this? I guess, this is reflect the initial design so far for what would be in the CPP. As Trevor said, you're still waiting on the audit and stuff for that. And like, it might take a month or two before we submit it on chain and stuff. And, things can be modified and we can have another call if things get modified and you need, community input. At the same time, knowing who the multisig owners are, I think would be helpful prior to it being submitted online on chain. But yeah, any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna go back. Amy shared Celo core contract 5. Amy, do you know if anyone can, take ownership of like, talking about this? Because I don't have any context, unfortunately.
Yeah. It looks like York couldn't join us, so I can speak a little bit to it with the context, the limited context that I have. But so ideally, we would have wanted to get the release notes updated. We're still wrapping up some of the audit as we speak. It should be done within the next day or so. But things that are included, if you scroll down to that, up a little bit more. The part that has the merged and in-flight changes, these are the things that are included. And just to talk through them, it includes some changes to being able to use the EIP 1167 proxy. This is would be useful for our Comency meta transaction wallet contracts, which would reduce the cost for the verification flow. This has been proven to be very costly, and we have pretty low throughput on the ability of how many individuals can go through the verification flow on chain. And so this will help increase that throughput. Then there's also the CIP 10 changes, which I know some community members are eagerly awaiting for. That allows additional account signers for you to specify more account signers. There is, okay, if you're gonna click through them, this is the Comency one. Do you want to click through the one right above that?
Sorry, I have no reference except numbers, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can walk through them in order. Actually, that might be better. Okay, well, this one is the
sorry, we'll go item by item. How about that? We'll go with the first one right now. Implement identity proxies. I don't know if you covered it or not, but yeah, hold on. And my internet is taking a little too long to load it, but yeah, here it is. Go for it.
Okay, the identity proxy. Okay, oh, this is adding a new proxy type, which will enable some of our account recovery flows. So there is a project in process to make, if individuals lose their mnemonic for their EOA, they're still able to recover their account. So this is a core component of that.
All right, I'm gonna go back then to the list, to the next item. Oh, come on. All right, 7661, it's smart contract changes to support EIP 1167 increments.
Yeah, so this is the one I was mentioning before. This adds a new proxy type, which requires much less gas. And this will increase our overall verification attestation throughput on chain.
Okay, I'm gonna go back then. I'm gonna go to the in-flight changes, 5913. That would be, what is that? I don't know why it's taking so long to load. CIP and contract changes.
So yeah, these are the CIP 10 changes where we would be adding the ability to add more account signers to a registered account. So right, like as it stands right now, there's just a ability to register a validator signer and an attestation signer and a vote signer, but this provides more flexibility to add additional signers.
Cool. Next one, 7550. Whitelist not acceptable.
This one's pretty self-explanatory. Whitelist should not accept new fee currencies without Oracle price.
Right.
Yeah.
It's cool when the proposal is just self-explanatory. All right.
And then this is just a minor update to error messaging in some of our contracts that has a bit of a confusing error message. So this is just kind of a bug fix.
Cool. Awesome. Indeed, we're punted to the next cycle. All right. So I think the one thing that we haven't done, I guess, because we haven't received the finalized release note, is coming up with a forum post about the core contracts release 4. I think we're at 4, right? Like this is number 4. But yeah. If we probably will start creating a forum post, and I think we submitted the audit, submitted it for an audit at Celo. I'm not sure. Is your kind of call?
Yeah, so we currently have it. It's finished. We're finishing up the audit right now. And the release process should be we released it in staging yesterday, and the next week would be Baklava, the week after Alpha Horus, and then the week after mainnet. So we still have 3 weeks till mainnet.
Thanks God. All right. Let me see what then. It's gonna be then. If you're saying next week gonna be Alpha Horus and then Baklava, or vice versa?
Vice versa.
So Tuesday the 22nd is next week, and that will be Baklava, and then Alpha Horus the 29th, and then the 6th of July will be the target date for contract release 4, assuming we get the audit back and everything is Gucci. That would be the target date. Okay, so I think there's one action item here, at least for the core contract. There's like, we can specify a forum post, a simple forum post once we, have all these items, like what is included in them. And we can add the audit report to it later. I can sync with you after. I can show you a template that I use for forum posts. It's super easy, it's straightforward, as long as we have the release notes and stuff from from the captain. And yeah, I think at least for the other proposals, which is Grandamento is like apparently like 1 or 2 months away, so we don't even have to worry about it right now. But there should be, I guess, Marcus's proposal, um, which is yeah, CGP 30. Marcus, I'm not sure what your timeline is on it. Normally, when we do submit thing for on-chain governance, we try to batch proposals together just to minimize voter fatigue. If your timeline is okay within 3 weeks, we can add it to that. If not, I mean, it depends on what your requirements are. We can scope it out for before that, depending on whether it's you know ready and stuff, like from the implementation phase and stuff.
I think within 3 weeks is fine.
Okay, cool. So we'll add it and stuff. We'll add CGP 30 to the core contract release 4. Within 3 weeks, that would be submitted on chain. We'll have enough material before then about what is going to be submitted and what is the governance proposals that are going to be added. And yeah. So thank you everyone for another governance call. And we look forward to the next one. Stay tuned for any kind of updates within Discord and on the mailing list. And thank you.